Nobody in Clearwater State Penitentiary ever guessed that the most dangerous guy in the joint was sitting right there, tray in hand, letting himself get punked by someone who wouldn't last a single punch against him. Silent. Still. Like all the chaos around him was just background noise, until his silence itself started to feel like a threat. At Clearwater, silence never meant peace. It meant trouble was coming. A shank, a setup, a score being settled. The clatter of forks on metal trays, the shuffle of boots down concrete halls, the eyes always darting to cameras that recorded everything but never stopped a thing. Behind those cracked walls, fear had a face, and it walked broad-chested, tattoos up to the neck, eyes sharp enough to cut. His name was Dante Koa, and he was gravity in that block. Wherever he walked, the whole place seemed to shrink. Dante wasn't just a bully, he was the system. His power didn't come only from his bulk or the legend that he once shattered a guard's jaw and walked away without a scratch. His power came from the order he enforced, a code of obedience kept alive by quick public punishments. If you bowed, you ate. If you resisted, you became an example. For nearly 2 years he ruled Block 13 with intimidation, manipulation, and one thing everybody understood: predictability. Everyone knew what happened if you crossed him. Until Eli Mercer showed up. Eli wasn't some hardened lifer with a rap sheet a mile long. He came in quiet, carrying himself like a man who wasn't scared but wasn't looking for a fight either. Tall, lean, pale, eyes the color of steel that seemed more focused on the room than his own future. He wore the standard blues, no tweaks, no swagger. His walk wasn't rushed, wasn't hesitant. He was placed straight into Block 13, no intake process, no slow build-up. That alone raised eyebrows. But it was on his second day, in the chow hall, that things shifted. It was a sticky morning, the air thick with the stench of canned meat, old beans and sweat. The cons sat in their usual spots, weak ones clumped together, strong ones keeping their distance. Eli, though, just strolled in, grabbed his tray, and sat at the edge of the nearest table like the rules didn't apply to him. Ate slow, calm, like he had all the time in the world. And that was enough to draw Dante's attention. Dante didn't need reasons, just openings. He rose, picked up a pitcher of ice water, and moved toward Eli, each step like a countdown. The buzz of the room died. The only sound left was the creak of the floor under Dante's weight. He came up behind Eli, grabbed him by the hair with one hand, and with the other slammed the pitcher over his head, shoving his face straight into the tray. Rice and sauce flew across the table. Eli didn't yell, didn't fight. Just stayed there, face buried in food like it didn't matter. "You got no say here, rookie," Dante growled, voice low and iron hard, pressing his head down. "You eat when I let you, walk when I tell you, and sleep if I feel like it." Water dripped down Eli's face, mixing with sauce and grains of rice dripping off his nose. Slowly he lifted his head, wiped his eyes on his sleeve, and, without a word, kept eating, bite after bite, calm, steady, like Dante wasn't even there. Even the coldest inmates blinked at that. Some looked away, others stared, waiting for the explosion. But Dante just stood there, frozen, staring back, not sure if he'd just won or lost. That night, the story spread. Some said Eli was nuts. Others swore it was part of a plan. Nobody could believe a man in his right mind would eat through humiliation like that. But Eli didn't tattle, didn't make alliances, didn't say a word. He just stuck to his routine. Silent steps, blank stare, no rush. The next days brought more tests. Kenny, Dante's right-hand man, shoulder-checked him in the yard. Nothing. Others tossed toilet water into his cell. No reaction. Trash talk, jokes, straight-up threats. Eli met all of it with the same wall of indifference. It wasn't just calm, it was like he was waiting. For what? No one knew. Dante's frustration grew. The more he failed to break Eli, the weaker his grip got. Not openly, but in the whispers in the halls, the sideways glances, the quiet respect Eli started pulling without lifting a finger. And Dante knew. It was dangerous. A new force was rising, one that didn't need to flex to shake the whole block. But Eli Mercer stayed quiet, kept eating alone, kept turning in early, kept watching. And while the block speculated who he was, what he wanted, what he might be planning, one thing was clear. Nobody had a clue what he was really capable of. Not yet. Clearwater Penitentiary was one of the oldest lockups in the state of Arizona. Built back in the 60s, it had already survived 4 riots, 2 fires, and one near breakout that almost saw 100 inmates pour out into the desert. After that, the local authorities adopted a clear strategy: keep up the appearance of control, but let the inmates run the rules themselves. The medium security wing, where Dante ruled, worked like an underground city. It had its own economy, its own politics, its own punishments, and its own order. Dante had built that empire with military precision. He didn't just beat people down, he organized. Extra food from the chow hall went through him, smuggled cigarettes, him again. Even conjugal visits, when they happened, had to be cleared through Dante's network of crooked guards. To stay on top, he needed 2 things: fear and predictability. And Eli was starting to chip away at both. Eli didn't play the game. He didn't try to blend in, didn't throw challenges either, but by ignoring all the invisible rules, he shook the foundation of Dante's logic. His silence was dangerous, his lack of reaction even more. What nobody realized was that Eli's silence wasn't carelessness, it was strategy. There was something in Eli's stare, like he carried a locked box inside him, heavy, unnameable. What unsettled people most wasn't the mystery, but the calm. Inmates who'd been humiliated, beaten, or threatened usually broke down within days. They begged for transfers, traded favors for protection, or just fell apart. Eli only seemed to grow stronger with each attempt to intimidate him. Dante wouldn't admit it out loud, but he'd already tried everything he knew to break him. Straight-up violence, psychological digs, isolation. One night, Kenny suggested something darker: burn Eli during kitchen duty. But Dante shook his head. Not yet. If we hit him wrong, he turns into a martyr. That's the last thing I need. Kenny didn't get it right away, but he obeyed. He knew Dante's instincts had a twisted kind of politics to them. In prison, you burn a man wrong, you don't make him weak. You make him untouchable. Meanwhile, 2 inmates had started watching Eli closely. One was Marvin, a former accountant locked up for bank fraud, who spent his days sketching impossible escape maps. The other was Terrell, a gang kid from LA, doing time on a weapons charge. Marvin saw strategy in Eli. Terrell saw danger. Neither spoke to the other, but both knew Eli wasn't normal. Marvin tried to make contact in the yard, handed Eli a copy of The Art of War. "Don't bother giving it back. Just thought you might like it." Eli said nothing, took the book, studied the cover, tucked it away. The next day, Marvin found a folded page, underlined, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." Marvin got the message. Eli didn't want allies, but he wasn't anyone's target either. Tyrell, on the other hand, muttered to his crew, "Guy doesn't talk, doesn't react, doesn't threaten, just waits. That's psycho shit." Even the guards had started noticing. Reynolds, a veteran with more than a decade inside Clearwater, leaned over to his partner one night. "He's either a genius or he's a ticking bomb, and when he blows, it's going to be something to see." Eli's file was too clean, too perfect. No solid backstory. No family visits, no phone calls. He looked less like an inmate and more like a ghost dropped in for a mission nobody could name. Dante felt it. Every time he walked the tiers, every time he barked orders or broke someone down, the eyes in the block shifted, not in fear of him, but in curiosity about Eli. And that ate at him. Dante's kingdom ran on predictability, but Eli was the glitch in the system. Day 13 started like every other. Siren at 6 a.m. Doors cracking open, bodies spilling out of cells like machines on schedule. But the vibe wasn't the same. The silence wasn't fear anymore. It was scrutiny. Eli had become the fixed point in the chaos, and that made him impossible to ignore. That yard session, Dante made his move. Kenny had two rival gang members, Travis and Leon, step in to provoke Eli. The plan was simple: force a reaction. Any reaction. As Eli walked his usual laps, Travis dropped a shiv right at his feet. Leon leaned in from behind, whispering low enough for only a few to hear, "You're not invisible. You'll bleed like the rest of us sooner or later." Eli looked at the blade, bent down slowly, and with one flick of his foot, nudged it back toward Travis, then kept walking. The gesture spread through the prison like wildfire. In here, when a man refuses to respond to a threat, there are only two explanations. He's a coward, or he's so far above it he doesn't need to prove a damn thing. For Dante, that was the beginning of collapse. He knew it. He needed something sharper, more decisive, but he couldn't kill Eli, not with the eyes of the whole block, maybe even outsiders, tracking his every move. Later that day in the chow hall, Dante switched tactics. Instead of attacking, he sat directly across from Eli. The entire wing froze. You could feel the tension in the air, thick as concrete dust. Eli chewed slowly, same calm as always, while Dante studied him like a predator, sizing up something it had never seen before. "You're not from here," Dante said, "and no one knows where you came from. But let me explain how this works. Every man in this place has blood on his hands. Some of it still drips." Eli didn't answer, just ate. "Stay silent, you'll end up alone. And alone in here? That's fresh meat." Eli's face didn't change, but his shoulders tightened, barely. A fraction. Dante caught it. "Found a crack," he muttered to Kenny afterward. "Now I just wait for it to break." But Dante was wrong. That wasn't a crack. That was calculation. And in silence, Eli was already making adjustments. By then, Block 13 was sliding out of control. Marvin's cell got tossed by Dante's crew. His maps vanished. Terrell nearly got stabbed over a cigarette trade. None of it tied to Eli, but everyone could feel Dante grasping for dominance, like a man swinging harder because he knows he's losing. Even Reynolds noticed. "Dante's desperate," he said. "Used to punish in silence. Now he barks before he bites. He's losing his grip." Inmates started acknowledging Eli. First cautious nods, then whispered words. He never replied, but he never ignored either. Just watched, calculated, waiting for something or someone. On the night of day 16, Dante stormed Eli's cell with 3 men. No guard stepped in. They slammed him against the wall while Dante walked in with a steel bar wrapped in cloth. "Last chance, rookie. Talk or bleed." Eli met his eyes. 1 second, 2, then closed his own and said nothing. Dante raised the bar, but before he swung, footsteps echoed in the hall. Reynolds appeared, leaning against the wall, arms folded. "Bust him up here, Dante, and you'll be the one getting shipped to Max." "Just saying." Dante froze, teeth clenched. The men released Eli. The moment broke, but the silence stayed. Eli lay back down and slept. The war had started. Now the whole prison turned around one single question: why hasn't he hit back yet? Clearwater Prison was starting to feel the cracks of a broken balance. For years, Dante had kept Block 13 running like its own little ecosystem. There was fear, yes, but there was also order. Now, with Eli's silent presence, that order was splitting in places Dante could no longer control. The first ripple came through Tyrell. Once part of Dante's crew, he had quietly drifted away since Eli arrived. Smart enough to survive and sharp enough to watch without getting burned, Tyrell started voicing doubts in the yard, words that slipped through the cell blocks like smoke. What if the old man ain't the top dog anymore? It didn't take long for Dante to hear it. Tyrell was found in his cell with a slash across his face. Not fatal, but the scar made the message clear. The rules still held. Yet Tyrell didn't stay quiet. and that only fueled the fire. Meanwhile, Marvin had begun his own investigation into Eli. He jotted notes in his little ledger every time Eli made the slightest move. Marvin was convinced there was a pattern, an invisible plan. He tried talking to Eli, but always got the same empty stare, as if Eli knew exactly what Marvin wanted and refused to play along. So Marvin changed tactics. He leaned on his sway with the older cons and dug into Eli's transfer records. Through a backdoor deal with a clerk in administration, paid for with cigarettes and silence, Marvin discovered something chilling. There were no state records for Eli's intake. The paperwork was signed by someone far above the normal chain of command. Sealed. Classified. Even cases tied to national security didn't look like this. "He ain't here by accident," Marvin whispered. "Somebody put him in here, and it wasn't to serve time." The guards were growing cautious too. Reynolds, who had been keeping his own quiet watch since day one, started writing private reports, not official, just his own notes, timestamps, inmate interactions, even the subtle shift in Dante's behavior. The man who once walked tall now paced like a predator losing its grip. Reynolds had seen plenty of men fall in this place, but never by doing nothing. Eli wasn't reacting, he was converting, not by force, but by presence. In a hushed conversation with two other officers, Reynolds said, "If this guy's federal, he didn't land here by mistake. He's watching, waiting. The question is, waiting for what?" That same week, another crack appeared in Dante's control. One of his men, Rigo, got caught moving burner phones to inmates in another block without clearance. Normally, Dante would have staged a brutal public punishment, but this time, he just cut Rigo out of his duties. The rumor hit harder than any beating. Dante had gone soft. If he didn't punish, then who did? The vacuum spread fast. For the first time in years, small alliances sprouted without Dante's approval. Eli never joined any of them, but his name, his shadow, was in every single conversation. "He's a damn lighthouse," Terrell told Marvin. "Nobody understands it, but everybody's drawn to him." The prison director, Richard Haynes, was taking notice too. The reports piling up on his desk spelled one thing: Block 13 was a ticking bomb. Yet Eli Mercer's name was never in the middle of the fights, only at the edges. "A man who does nothing but sparks everything," Haynes muttered, staring at Eli's profile on his monitor. "What the hell are you really doing here?" By the end of the week, an announcement shook Block 13, a temporary redistribution of cells for security balancing. The kind of bureaucratic excuse everyone knew meant one thing: the system was failing. Eli was reassigned to Cell 8, right next door to Dante. Coincidence? Nobody believed that. When he heard, Dante smiled for the first time in days, a bitter, wolfish smile. "Now we'll see how long he lasts," he said quietly. Then to Kenny, "Even ghosts stop playing dead eventually." The transfers took place late in the day. Silent lines of inmates moved under the eyes of 2 armed officers and 1 administrator. On paper, it looked routine, but the guards' eyes betrayed unease. Nothing in Clearwater ever happened without purpose. Putting Eli next to Dante wasn't chance, it was destiny. The new cells were doubles. Dante bunked with Kenny, his right-hand man. Eli was paired with Malik, a veteran hustler doing time for extortion, who spent his nights sketching birds on the wall with charcoal. That night, the tension between cells 7 and 8 stretched like a live wire. The bars kept them apart, but the words cut clean through concrete. "You think they'll protect you forever, rookie?" Dante murmured through the wall. "When the lights go out, nobody's gonna hear you scream." Eli didn't answer, but Malik did, voice low. "You'll have to move sooner or later," he whispered, "or he'll kill you, or worse, turn you into one of his." Eli only nodded. Not agreement, recognition. Like he already knew. At 3 a.m., the block woke to a siren. A glitch hit the electronic locks. For exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds, every cell in Block 13 swung open. At first, no one moved. It felt like a trap. But Kenny slid his door wide, peering out into the hallway. He grinned. "They're open. Let's go." Dante was already lacing his boots. In cell 8, Malik froze. "No rules now. You fight or you die." Eli stood, stretching as if from a nap, reached under his mattress and pulled out, not a weapon, but a folded notebook, just paper. Dante and Kenny slipped down the tier, quiet as shadows. Some inmates tested their doors, but most stayed put, waiting for the system to reset. Malik backed into the corner as Dante stopped outside cell 8. He didn't step inside. He just looked Eli over, head to toe. "Funny thing," Dante said. "Even now, you're calm. Like you've been waiting for me since the day you walked in." Eli checked the clock on the wall. 3:17. "You think this is control," Dante pressed on. "This is prison, and in here, I'm the only sure thing there is." Kenny stepped forward, ready to drag Eli out, but then the radios exploded. Every guard frequency lit up at once, overlapping voices. Lockdown protocol triggered from the control room. The cells slammed shut. Magnetic bolts hummed back to life. Eli and Malik were sealed inside. Dante and Kenny were caught in the open. Emergency lights flared. Within seconds, 5 armed officers stormed the block. But the real shock came with the prison director, Haynes, walking in, flanked by 2 men in suits no one had ever seen before. "Where is he?" one of the suits demanded. Dante and Kenny were thrown to the ground, cuffed without a fight. The air shifted. Even Dante didn't argue. The 2 men walked straight to cell 8. One slid in a master key and pulled the door open. "Mercer," the man said flatly. "We need to talk. Now." Malik froze in disbelief. Eli tucked the notebook into his pocket and stepped out. No one tried to stop him. No one even breathed. In the corridor, Eli paused just long enough to glance at Dante, still kneeling in cuffs. "I told you," he said softly. "No anger, no mockery, just truth. You'd be the first to speak." Dante tried to raise his head, but Eli was already walking away, swallowed by the suits and the dark corridor beyond. 30 seconds later, Block 13 was silent again. By morning, Eli Mercer was gone. No official explanation was ever given. The next morning felt heavy. The thin, cold light slipping through Block 13's slit windows looked different somehow, like the prison itself could feel that something was missing, or someone. Eli Mercer was gone. The inmates woke like always, but the silence was thicker than usual. No announcement over the PA. No memo tacked up on the bulletin boards, not even guard chatter. From the outside, you'd swear Eli never existed. No roll call, no personal effects left behind, just a quiet hollow where a walking riddle used to be. In the next cell over, Dante sat on his bunk, hands on his knees, eyes fixed on the wall. Kenny tried to make conversation and got nothing back. The man who ran this place with a clenched fist now stared into space like he was waiting for something, or someone, to return. He knew it wouldn't. Malik, who'd shared a cell with Eli for a handful of nights, wasn't the same either. The birds he used to charcoal on the walls stopped. Instead, he started writing short lines, fragments of conversations, number strings, dates. Like he was piecing together a puzzle only he could see. Tyrell, by contrast, walked the yard a little straighter. Not because he was in charge, but because Eli's absence left room for something new. Among the inmates, the rookie's name became code. Some called him the Ghost. Others just said he knew. What Eli knew, no one could pin down. But everyone felt it. No one felt it more than Marvin, the accountant. The void became an obsession. He combed internal logs, tried the library terminals, leaned on a maintenance guy for favors. Nothing. No Eli in any system, not even the auto-generated intake code. Every inmate gets on day 1. Gone, scrubbed by someone way above local pay grades. Talking with Tyrell, Marvin finally said, He was planted with a purpose, and now he's been extracted like an experiment. Tyrell squinted into the hard yard sun, eyes on the concrete wall. He didn't disappear, he said at last. He was completed. In the guard wing, the mood was off too. Reynolds, who'd tracked Eli step by step, kept quiet. In his private notebook, he wrote 3 words he told no one: wasn't an inmate. Director Haynes pretended everything was normal, but he started visiting the block more. Watching, chatting with shot callers, taking the temperature. He'd seen riots flare out of nowhere. This was different. The fear wasn't coming from pressure, it was coming from the unknown. And Dante had changed. He didn't retaliate for lost men, didn't hand out punishments, slept more, ate less, spoke little. People still respected him, but the air didn't bend around him anymore. He wasn't the center of gravity. Everyone knew there was someone who'd put him on his knees without ever throwing a punch. Eli didn't win by force. He won with time, with presence, with waiting. That was what haunted Dante most. He didn't understand it. No one did. That's why the fear lingered. On the 4th night, Dante snapped awake from a nightmare. Sure, he'd heard footsteps in the tier. He stood there sweating, listening. Nothing. But he knew. Real power isn't the thing that shouts. It's the thing that vanishes and leaves questions behind. Days after Eli's exit settled into a new routine, quieter, tighter. Block 13 was no longer a fiefdom. Dante's reign hadn't been toppled by a showdown, but worn away, grain by grain. All that remained were the ruins. Dante was still feared, but differently. Before, fear came from his strength. Now it came from the emptiness around him. The men who used to follow him blindly kept their distance. Even Kenny, most loyal of all, avoided the topic, avoided Dante's eyes. That silent loss to Eli had rewritten the ecosystem. That's when the shift began. Tyrell, the Watcher, stepped up. He started talking about structure, not power but coexistence. Small agreements to cool beefs between minor crews. A few guys even shared hygiene items and paperbacks. Unthinkable weeks earlier. It wasn't revolution, it was survival evolving. Nobody here is untouchable, Tyrell told them. But if everybody keeps acting like they are, we'll eat each other alive. Eli proved that, not with words, with what he didn't do. The first time Marvin heard that, he couldn't hide his smile. He wrote it down in the same notebook where he'd once scribbled code about Eli. Now it was names, ideas, possibilities. The most obvious change, though, was Dante. He stopped patrolling the block like he owned it. He walked alone, drank his coffee in silence, read an old book he'd found in storage, a carpentry manual. No one knew why. Maybe he was looking for order in something his hands could shape. Kenny edged up to him one day. "You hiding?" Without looking up, Dante said, "I'm trying to remember who I was before I learned to break people." That line moved through the tears faster than any punch he'd ever thrown. It wasn't redemption. No one believed Dante flipped overnight. But admitting there'd been a version of himself before the violence, that was new. Dangerous even, to the system that made him. It meant he might be able to deprogram himself. Even the guards noticed. Reynolds started logging something he'd never written in Block 13 before. No incidents. The kind of quiet that usually comes before war now felt like someone trying for peace. Malik started drawing again. Not birds this time. Men, seated, eyes closed. One sketched from behind with a single word beneath it. Time. Eli was still a topic, but more symbol than man. He turned into an archetype. Some said he was a government plant testing social responses under confinement. Others swore he was ex-FBI under deep cover. A few insisted he never existed at all, that he was a psychological op from the warden to destabilize the prison's power center. What they all agreed on was this: Eli scrambled Clearwater's logic. Upstairs, Director Haynes kept reading daily reports from Block 13. The tone had shifted. Fewer fights, fewer isolation requests, fewer internal flare-ups. It flew in the face of every stat he knew. Alone in his office, Haynes scrubbed through archived camera feeds. He replayed Eli's walks, his trays of food, those quiet looks. He tried to pinpoint what had actually happened here. He found nothing. Maybe that was the point. Eli left no speeches, no heroics, just behavior, a way of being, existing inside chaos without becoming part of it. Dante, once blind beyond brute force, now sat for hours studying rough wood as he shaped it with scavenged tools. Each shaving that curled away looked like he was digging into himself. He never said it out loud. He didn't have to. Eli beat him, not with fists, not with shame, but with conscience, by forcing him to look inward where no prison can keep you safe. Block 13 looked steady on the surface, but silence in Clearwater was never permanent. It was the eye of the storm, uneasy calm before the inevitable. Dante kept to himself, but his eyes were sharper than ever. Every morning, he woke before the siren and sat at the edge of his bunk, staring down the corridor, as if waiting for something or someone. Eli's name had stopped being spoken, but nobody had forgotten. What happened during the blackout had already turned into legend. Every inmate had their own version. Some said Eli was pulled out to protect Dante. Others swore he'd been promoted by some shadow government program to destabilize prison gang leaders. And some believed he never really left at all, just disappeared into the system's basement, biding his time. Reynolds, the veteran guard, had his own theories. He didn't talk about them, but he was seen more often than usual in admin, digging through old camera files, outdated reports, anything tied to Eli's transfer. On a night shift, he muttered to a colleague, "If he came in the usual way, there'd be a trail, but there's nothing. No tracking, no mugshot, no medical. Like he was printed and deleted in 24 hours. Even without Eli, Dante was training again. Pull-ups, laps in the yard, pounding a makeshift bag in an unused mess hall. But it wasn't a show of dominance anymore. It was prep. For what? No one knew. But everyone felt the tension rising. That's when the fights crept back in. First small, an argument in the library, a shove in the hall. Then sharper, shanks hidden, brawls in the showers. Tyrell's fragile attempt at building some kind of informal peace collapsed the second people started whispering, "What if Eli comes back?" Because if he did, everything would shift again. "The prison split," Marvin said, exasperated. "Half waiting for him, half terrified he'll return. His absence is more powerful than his presence ever was." Dante stayed quiet. But inside, something was breaking. On the 28th day since Eli's removal, a message reached Block 13. A letter no sender slipped into a janitor's locker, passed up the chain to Director Haynes. One line, handwritten in hard block letters, "It isn't over." No one claimed it, but Haynes knew. And so did Dante. The next morning, security gates stayed shut. Transfers cancelled. The air in Clearwater thickened again, like weeks earlier, dense and restless, bracing for impact. Kenny found Dante drenched in sweat, finishing another hour of drills. "You think he's coming back?" Dante didn't answer right away. He wiped his face, looked at Kenny like seeing him for the first time. "He never left. He's just waiting for the right time." Kenny hesitated. "And if he does come back?" Dante's silence stretched, then broke, low. "This time, I'll be ready." That same day, Tyrell was transferred to another block. His fragile leadership crumbled. Inmates fell back into small packs, eyes down, understanding the calm had only been a pause. In admin, Haynes received a black envelope, hand-delivered by a federal agent who offered no explanation. Inside, a single sheet, 2 lines. "Transfer approved. Exceptional authorization. Infiltrator will return in 48 hours. The name printed cold and clear, Eli Mercer. Morning felt ordinary, but the air tasted metallic, charged, skin prickling before the first siren. Everyone sensed it, inmates, guards. Block 13 knew something was about to break. At 9:47 a.m., A security convoy slipped in through the back gates. No announcement, no ceremony. 4 federal agents, 2 outside administrators, and a man in orange stepped out in chains, hood over his head. His eyes, though, were open, steady. His walk, unshaken. Eli Mercer was back. His cell was ready. Same one. Number 8, right beside Dante's. The rumor spread faster than any official word. Kenny spotted the convoy through a ventilation shaft. By noon, the whole block knew. So did Dante. But he said nothing, made no move, just waited. In the mess hall, eyes darted everywhere. Eli took his tray, sat in the exact same spot as before, ate slow, unhurried. Dante stood after Eli's 4th spoonful. For the first time in 30 days, their eyes locked. No noise, just silence. Dante's gaze had changed. No rage, no bluff, just focus, and a hunger he couldn't name. He walked forward, slow. Eli looked up, but didn't rise. "I waited," Dante said. "Thought you were done, but you came back." Eli set his spoon down. The soft clink was louder than a gunshot. "I came back because you didn't learn," he said quietly. Dante inhaled, fists tightening, body coiled. "I've got nothing left to prove, just one thing I need." Eli stood, face to face now, tall, solid, 2 worlds colliding in the heart of the prison. "Then do it," Eli said. Dante swung, fast, hard. Not enough. Eli shifted, let the punch slide past. A clean pivot. He caught Dante's arm, twisted the weight, dropped him with one precise throw. No drama, no shout, just the thud of Dante's body on concrete echoing louder than any alarm. Dante scrambled up, swinging again. Eli caught the wrist, snapped an elbow strike and drove him into the wall. Dante collapsed to his knees, breath ragged but still fighting. "Why?" he yelled. "Why didn't you do this before?" Eli stepped closer, knelt in front of him, eyes sharp. "Because before, you had to fall without being hit. You had to collapse on your own." Dante slumped, sweat streaking his face, eyes empty. "And now?" Eli stood, turned his back. "Now, it's on you to decide what's left of you." The mess hall stayed frozen. No guards moved. No inmate breathed. The victory wasn't in strength. It wasn't in humiliation. It was in restraint, coming back only to finish what had started, to show that real control isn't forced, it's absorbed. Dante didn't get back up. Eli walked away, silent as always. In the hall, he passed Reynolds. The guard stopped him. "That was it?" Eli paused, met his eyes. It was necessary, and kept walking. The official record showed nothing, no fight, no incident, no injuries. But everyone who was there knew the truth. That was the day the bully fell in seconds. After the clash, nothing seemed to change on the surface. Clearwater slipped back into its usual rhythm. Inmates filing into the yard, eating in silence, trading glances, whispers and smokes. Guards pretended they were in control. The brass kept the reports spotless. But beneath it all, the structure had shifted. Dante started showing up to the mess hall only during the off hours. He no longer walked with puffed-up shoulders or barked orders out loud. He still trained, but always alone, quietly. He wasn't seen as a leader anymore, or as a tyrant. Now he was just another inmate, and that for him was the real punishment. Kenny faded completely, his influence gone. He tried latching onto other groups, but the respect had evaporated. Without Dante as a shield, he was just an echo with no voice. Eli, on the other hand, carried on as he always had, silent, punctual, invisible, and, at the same time, everywhere. His presence no longer shocked anyone. It demanded vigilance. Everyone knew what he could do. But more than that, they knew he had chosen not to use his strength until the moment it was necessary. The inmates started watching themselves more closely, avoiding pointless fights, stepping back from petty conflicts. Not out of fear of Eli, but because he'd left a question hanging in the air. If he, with everything he knew, could choose to wait, why couldn't they? 2 months later, Director Haynes put in for a transfer. On his last day, he crossed paths with Eli in the corridor. No words. Just a slight nod, barely there. a silent acknowledgement that the experiment, whatever it had been, was over. Reynolds stayed. He never filed an official account of what he'd seen, but he wrote less now, watched more. He knew Clearwater would never be the same again. Cell 8 became something symbolic. No new inmate was placed there for months, like the space still belonged to something bigger than a name. And Eli, he remained, followed the rules, took orders, stayed within the lines. But the entire prison knew he was there because he chose to be, and if he ever chose to leave, no fence would hold him. Months later, a new officer started work in Clearwater. Curious about Block 13's incomplete records, he asked Reynolds about a name he'd seen scribbled in handwritten notes, but nowhere in the official system. Who was Eli Mercer? Reynolds just smiled, shaking his head slowly. Someone who wasn't supposed to be here, but came with a purpose. And what purpose was that? Reynolds glanced down the tier at the still empty Cell 8. To teach that real power is knowing when to act. So tell me, did you expect Eli Mercer to be just another inmate? Or that Dante would never fall? This story shows that the real fight isn't always physical. Sometimes it's silence, patience, and strategy. Now it's your turn. What would you have done in Eli's place? And in Dante's? Comment, share, tag someone who needs to understand the true meaning of defeating without raising your voice. Because in the end, the one who truly wins is the one who knows the right moment to move.